The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine courtyard of Kensington Palace, as Margaret Wilson adjusted her crisp uniform one final time. At 52 years old, she had served the royal family for nearly 3 decades, watching young princes and princesses grow into remarkable adults. Her weathered hands, steady despite the years, gripped her ceremonial weapon with practiced ease. Today felt different, though, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. Margaret had started her career as a junior guard when she was barely 23, fresh out of military training with dreams of serving her country in the most honorable way possible. Back then, female guards were rare, and she had to prove herself twice as hard as her male counterparts. Through sheer determination and unwavering dedication, she had climbed the ranks to become one of the most trusted members of the royal security team. Her specialty was protecting the younger royals, particularly during their formative years when they needed both security and a gentle, understanding presence. She had been there when Prince William took his first steps in the palace gardens, had comforted Prince Harry during his difficult teenage years, and had watched countless royal children navigate the complex world of growing up in the public eye. Princess Charlotte, now 11 years old, had become especially dear to Margaret's heart. The young princess was spirited, intelligent, and possessed a natural kindness that reminded Margaret why she had chosen this profession in the first place. Charlotte had a way of noticing things that others missed, of asking thoughtful questions that showed wisdom beyond her years, and of treating everyone around her with genuine respect, regardless of their position. The relationship between Margaret and Charlotte had developed naturally over the years, while maintaining the proper protocols and boundaries required of her position. Margaret had become a steady, reliable presence in the young princess's life. She was there during Charlotte's first riding lessons, standing guard as the princess learned to navigate her pony around the estate. She had been present during family gatherings, state dinners, and quiet family moments alike. Charlotte, for her part, had grown to see Margaret not just as a guard, but as someone she could trust completely. The princess often sought Margaret's presence during overwhelming royal events, finding comfort in the older woman's calm demeanor and steady smile. Margaret had a way of making Charlotte feel safe without making her feel restricted, a delicate balance that few in the royal security team had mastered. This morning, however, Margaret noticed unusual activity around the palace. Senior staff members were having hushed conversations in corners, and there seemed to be an air of tension that she couldn't quite place. She had served long enough to recognize when changes were coming, and her instincts told her that whatever was happening might affect her directly. During the morning briefing, Margaret's supervisor, Commander James Harrison, seemed unusually formal. He avoided making direct eye contact with her, which was unlike his usual straightforward manner. The briefing covered routine security protocols, upcoming royal engagements, and schedule changes. But Margaret sensed there was something important being left unsaid. As the briefing concluded, other guards filed out to take their positions, but Commander Harrison asked Margaret to stay behind. Her heart began to beat a little faster, though her expression remained professionally neutral. In her years of service, she had learned to prepare for any possibility, good or bad. The conversation that followed would change everything. Commander Harrison explained that there had been discussions at the highest levels about restructuring the security team. New protocols were being implemented, and there was pressure to bring in younger guards who might better relate to the modern royal children. Margaret listened carefully, her face showing no emotion, though inside she felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. The commander emphasized that this wasn't about her performance, which had always been exemplary. It wasn't about any failures or shortcomings in her service. Instead, it was about evolving with the times and ensuring that the royal family's security needs were met with fresh perspectives and new approaches. Margaret understood the reasoning even as her heart began to sink. She was being reassigned to a different position, one that would take her away from direct contact with the royal children. It was still an important role, still within the royal security apparatus, but it would mean leaving behind the work that had defined her life for so many years. Most painfully, it would mean no longer being Princess Charlotte's guard. Margaret accepted the news with the same grace and professionalism that had characterized her entire career. She thanked Commander Harrison for the opportunity to serve in her current capacity and assured him that she would handle the transition smoothly. Inside, however, She felt a deep sadness at the thought of leaving Charlotte without explanation, of disappearing from the young princess's life without the chance to say a proper goodbye. The timing of the change meant that Margaret would finish out the week in her current position before moving to her new assignment. This gave her a few more days with Charlotte, though she wasn't sure whether that made things easier or harder. She decided not to tell the princess about the change immediately, wanting to find the right moment and the right words to explain what was happening. As Margaret took her position outside Charlotte's study that afternoon, watching the princess work on her lessons with her tutor, she reflected on all the moments they had shared. There had been laughter and tears, moments of triumph and periods of struggle, quiet conversations and comfortable silences. Margaret had watched Charlotte grow from a curious little girl into a thoughtful young person with her own opinions and ideas about the world. The princess looked up from her books and smiled at Margaret through the window, a simple gesture that had become routine over the years. Margaret smiled back, wondering how many more of these small, precious moments they would have together. She began to think about how she would explain the situation to Charlotte, knowing that the princess deserved honesty and transparency, even if the truth would be difficult for both of them to accept. The following Tuesday brought an unexpected conversation that would set everything in motion. Princess Charlotte had finished her afternoon piano lesson and was walking through the palace corridors when she noticed Margaret standing at attention near the library entrance. What caught the princess's attention wasn't Margaret's presence, which was entirely normal, but something subtle in her demeanor that seemed different. Charlotte had always been perceptive, a trait that sometimes surprised the adults around her. She noticed when the palace staff seemed worried, when her parents were stressed about royal duties, and when something in her carefully structured world was about to change. Today she sensed that something was troubling Margaret, though the experienced guard maintained her professional composure as always. "Margaret," Charlotte said, approaching with the easy confidence that came from years of friendship within the bounds of their respective roles. "You seem quieter than usual today. Is everything all right?" Margaret's training had prepared her for many situations, but explaining her reassignment to an 11-year-old princess who had become genuinely fond of her was not covered in any manual. She looked down at Charlotte's concerned face and felt her resolve to keep the news private beginning to waver. "I'm perfectly fine, Your Royal Highness," Margaret replied, using the formal address that she typically reserved for official occasions. The formality itself was a signal to Charlotte that something was indeed different. Charlotte studied Margaret's face with the intensity that she usually reserved for particularly challenging math problems. She had learned to read people's expressions and body language, skills that served her well in the complex social world of royal life. Margaret's answer didn't ring true, and Charlotte decided to press gently for more information. "Margaret, we've known each other for years," Charlotte said, her voice carrying a maturity that sometimes surprised adults. "I can tell when something is bothering someone I care about. If there's something wrong, I'd like to help if I can." The sincerity in Charlotte's voice nearly broke Margaret's composure. Here was this young princess who could have demanded answers or simply moved on with her day, instead expressing genuine concern for Margaret's well-being. It was exactly this kind of thoughtfulness that had made protecting Charlotte such a joy over the years. Margaret glanced around the corridor to ensure they were alone, then knelt down so she could speak to Charlotte at eye level. This simple gesture signaled to the princess that what was about to be shared was important and personal, not just another routine interaction. "Your Royal Highness," Margaret began, then paused and started again. "Charlotte, there are going to be some changes in the security arrangements. I've been asked to take on a different role, which means I won't be your primary guard anymore." The impact of these words was immediate and visible on Charlotte's face. Her eyes widened with surprise, then narrowed with what looked like determination. For a moment she said nothing, processing this unexpected information and what it might mean for her daily life. "When?" Charlotte asked simply, her voice steady despite the obvious emotion behind the question. "At the end of this week," Margaret replied, admiring the princess's direct approach to difficult news. "They want to bring in younger guards who might better understand the needs of modern royal children." Charlotte's response surprised Margaret. Instead of accepting this explanation or expressing sadness about the change, the princess's expression shifted to something that Margaret recognized as the look Charlotte got when she encountered something she considered unfair or illogical. "That doesn't make sense," Charlotte said firmly. You understand my needs perfectly well. You've been understanding them for years. Why would they think someone younger would automatically be better at protecting me? Margaret found herself in the unusual position of having to defend a decision that she herself disagreed with. The commander believes that fresh perspectives might be beneficial. It's not about my performance, Charlotte. It's about evolving with the times. Have they asked me what I think about evolving with the times? Charlotte asked, her voice carrying a hint of the authority that she rarely exercised but was certainly entitled to use. This question caught Margaret off guard. In all the discussions about the security changes, no one had mentioned consulting the princess herself about her preferences. The assumption seemed to be that an 11-year-old wouldn't have valuable input about her own security arrangements, despite the fact that Charlotte was remarkably mature and observant for her age. I don't believe they have, Margaret admitted honestly. Charlotte was quiet for a long moment, clearly thinking through the situation. Margaret could almost see the wheels turning in the princess's mind as she processed not just the emotional impact of losing a trusted guardian, but also the logical flaws in the reasoning behind the decision. Margaret, Charlotte said finally, I want you to know that you've made me feel safe and understood in ways that go far beyond just security. You've been patient with my questions, you've helped me navigate difficult situations, and you've treated me like a real person, not just a title. That's not something that automatically comes with being young or new. Margaret felt tears threatening to well up in her eyes, but she maintained her composure. Thank you, Charlotte. That means more to me than you know. Protecting you and watching you grow has been the greatest honor of my career. Well, Charlotte said, straightening her shoulders in a way that reminded Margaret of the princess's grandmother during her most determined moments, I don't think this decision should be made without my input. After all, I'm the one who needs to feel safe and comfortable with whoever is protecting me. Margaret realized that Charlotte was not simply going to accept this change passively. The princess was beginning to formulate a plan, and Margaret recognized the determined expression that appeared on Charlotte's face when she had made up her mind about something important. What are you thinking, Charlotte? Margaret asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. I'm thinking, Charlotte replied with quiet conviction, that the people making decisions about my security should at least listen to what I have to say about it. And I'm thinking that you deserve better than to be replaced simply because someone thinks newer automatically means better. Margaret saw in that moment that Princess Charlotte was not just a child who happened to hold a royal title. She was someone who understood loyalty, fairness, and the value of experience. More importantly, she was someone who was prepared to speak up when she encountered something she believed to be wrong. That evening, Princess Charlotte found herself unable to focus on her usual bedtime routine. As her governess helped her prepare for bed, Charlotte's mind was racing with thoughts about Margaret's situation and what she might be able to do about it. The more she thought about the decision to reassign Margaret, the more convinced she became that it was not only unfair but also unwise. Charlotte had grown up understanding that her position came with both privileges and responsibilities. Her parents had always emphasized that being royal meant using her influence thoughtfully and standing up for what was right, even when it was difficult. Tonight she felt that this was exactly one of those moments when she needed to act on those principles. After her governess left, Charlotte sat at her writing desk and began to compose her thoughts. She wasn't entirely sure what form her intervention should take, but she knew she needed to organize her arguments clearly and present them in a way that adults would take seriously. Despite being only 11, Charlotte had observed enough royal business to understand that emotional appeals alone rarely changed institutional decisions. The next morning, Charlotte requested a meeting with her father, Prince William. This was unusual enough to raise eyebrows among the palace staff, as Charlotte typically spoke with her parents about serious matters during their regular family time. The formal request for a meeting suggested that Charlotte had something specific and important to discuss. Prince William agreed to meet with his daughter in his private study after lunch. Charlotte spent the morning carefully preparing what she wanted to say, practicing her arguments and anticipating possible responses. She had learned from watching her parents handle difficult conversations that preparation and clear thinking were essential when trying to convince someone to reconsider an important decision. When the time for the meeting arrived, Charlotte entered her father's study with a confidence that impressed the prince. She was clearly nervous, but her determination was evident in her posture and the steady way she made eye contact as she began to speak. "Father," Charlotte began, "I wanted to talk to you about Margaret Wilson, my security guard. I understand that there are plans to reassign her to a different position, and I believe this would be a mistake." Prince William was surprised by the directness of Charlotte's approach. He had expected perhaps a tearful plea to keep a favorite staff member, but Charlotte's tone suggested she had thought carefully about the situation and was prepared to present a reasoned argument. "I'm listening," Prince William said. Settling back in his chair and giving Charlotte his full attention, Charlotte took a deep breath and began to present her case. "Margaret has been protecting me for years, and in that time, she has never once failed to keep me safe. More than that, she understands how to balance security with allowing me to have normal experiences. She knows when I need space to be a regular child and when I need extra protection during public events." The princess paused, organizing her thoughts before continuing. "I've heard that the reason for replacing her is to bring in younger guards who might better understand modern royal children. But Father, Margaret does understand me. She listens to my concerns, she explains things when I have questions, and she has helped me navigate situations that were frightening or overwhelming." Prince William found himself impressed by his daughter's articulate presentation. Charlotte was making logical points rather than simply expressing emotional attachment, and she was demonstrating a level of insight into her own needs that surprised him. "Charlotte," Prince William said carefully, "these security decisions are made by professionals who have extensive experience in protection protocols. They consider many factors that might not be obvious to those of us who aren't security experts." "I understand that," Charlotte replied, "but I am the person being protected. Doesn't my comfort and confidence in my security team matter? If I don't trust my guards or feel comfortable with them, doesn't that actually make the security less effective?" This was a point that Prince William hadn't considered, and he found himself nodding slightly as Charlotte continued. "Margaret has earned my trust over years of consistent, reliable service. She knows my routines, my preferences, and my concerns. A new guard, no matter how young or well-trained, would have to start from the beginning in building that relationship. During that time, wouldn't I actually be less secure, not more?" Charlotte could see that her father was taking her argument seriously, which encouraged her to present her strongest point. "Father, I've watched you and Mother make decisions about royal duties and public service. You've always taught me that experience and proven reliability are valuable qualities. Why would those same qualities suddenly not matter when it comes to my security?" Prince William realized that his 11-year-old daughter had identified a logical inconsistency in the reasoning behind Margaret's reassignment. The decision had been presented to him as a modernization effort, but Charlotte was pointing out that it might actually be a step backward in terms of effective protection. "Have you spoken with Margaret about this?" Prince William asked. "She told me about the reassignment when I noticed she seemed troubled," Charlotte replied. "But she didn't complain or ask me to intervene. She was prepared to accept the decision professionally, as she always does. I'm the one who decided that this situation needed to be addressed." Prince William felt a surge of pride in his daughter's maturity and sense of justice. Charlotte wasn't simply trying to keep a favorite staff member. She was advocating for what she believed was right based on logical reasoning and careful consideration of the facts. "What exactly are you asking me to do, Charlotte?" Prince William inquired. "I'm asking you to speak with Commander Harrison and the other decision-makers about reconsidering Margaret's reassignment. I'm asking them to take my perspective into account when making decisions that directly affect my daily life and security. And I'm asking that they consider whether experience and proven effectiveness might be more valuable than simply bringing in someone new." Charlotte paused, then added with quiet conviction, "I'm also asking that they remember that I'm not just a security assignment to be managed. I'm a person with my own thoughts and feelings about who I trust to keep me safe." Prince William looked at his daughter with new respect. Charlotte had presented a compelling case that demonstrated not only logical thinking, but also a mature understanding of how good decisions should be made. More importantly, she had shown courage in speaking up for someone who had served her family faithfully for years. "I'll speak with Commander Harrison," Prince William promised. "I can't guarantee what the outcome will be, but I can ensure that your perspective is heard and seriously considered." Charlotte smiled with relief and gratitude. "Thank you, Father. That's all I was hoping for, that someone would listen and really think about whether this decision makes sense." As Charlotte left her father's study, Prince William found himself reflecting on the conversation. His daughter had shown him that sometimes the most important voices in a decision were those that weren't automatically included in the discussion. Charlotte's intervention had reminded him that effective leadership meant listening to all stakeholders, even when they happened to be 11 years old. Prince William's conversation with Commander Harrison took place the following morning, in the secure briefing room typically used for high-level security discussions. The commander had expected a routine meeting about upcoming royal engagements, so he was surprised when the prince began by asking detailed questions about Margaret Wilson's reassignment. "Commander Harrison," Prince William began, "I'd like to understand the reasoning behind the decision to move Margaret Wilson to a different position. Can you walk me through the factors that led to this conclusion?" Commander Harrison straightened in his chair, sensing that this wasn't merely a casual inquiry. "Your Royal Highness, the decision was made as part of our ongoing effort to modernize the Royal Protection Unit. We believe that bringing in younger officers might provide fresh perspectives on protecting the royal children as they grow up in an increasingly digital and complex world." "I see," Prince William replied thoughtfully. "And how was Margaret's performance evaluated as part of this decision?" "Margaret's service record is exemplary," the commander admitted. "She has never had a security incident. Her reports are always thorough and professional, and she has consistently received positive evaluations from her supervisors. This decision wasn't based on any deficiencies in her performance." Prince William leaned forward slightly. "Then help me understand why we would replace someone with an exemplary record. What specific advantages would a younger guard bring that Margaret cannot provide?" Commander Harrison found himself in the uncomfortable position of trying to defend a decision that, when examined closely, seemed to be based more on assumptions than on concrete evidence. "Well, sir, younger guards might be more familiar with current technology, social media trends, and the cultural references that appeal to modern children." "Commander," Prince William said carefully, "Princess Charlotte is 11 years old. Her primary concerns are her studies, her writing lessons, her family time, and feeling safe during public appearances. Are you suggesting that familiarity with social media trends is more important for her security than the trust and understanding that comes from years of working together?" The question hung in the air as Commander Harrison realized he was being asked to justify a decision that sounded increasingly arbitrary when subjected to logical scrutiny. He had been focused on implementing what seemed like a progressive policy, without carefully considering whether it actually served the royal family's best interests. Prince William continued, "I had an interesting conversation with Charlotte yesterday. She pointed out that her comfort and confidence in her security team directly affects the effectiveness of that security. A guard she doesn't trust or feel comfortable with could actually create vulnerabilities rather than eliminate them." Commander Harrison nodded slowly, beginning to see the situation from a different perspective. In his focus on modernization and bringing fresh approaches to royal security, he had overlooked the fundamental importance of the relationship between protector and protected. "Charlotte also made another point that I found compelling," Prince William added. "She noted that we consistently value experience and proven reliability in other areas of royal service. Our private secretaries, our advisors, our household staff, we keep people in these positions precisely because experience matters. Why would security be different?" The commander found himself without a good answer to this question. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that the decision to reassign Margaret had been made in a vacuum, without considering the specific circumstances of her relationship with Princess Charlotte, or the practical implications of breaking up a successful working partnership. "Your Royal Highness," Commander Harrison said finally, "I'm beginning to see that we may have made this decision too hastily. We focused on general principles of modernization, without adequately considering the specific situation with Princess Charlotte and Margaret Wilson." Prince William appreciated the commander's willingness to reconsider. "I'm not opposed to modernization, Commander, but I think any changes to our security arrangements should be based on actual needs and demonstrated benefits, not just the assumption that newer is automatically better." The conversation continued for another hour as they discussed the broader implications of security decisions and how to balance the need for fresh perspectives with the value of experience and established relationships. Commander Harrison found himself reconsidering not just Margaret's situation, but the entire approach to making personnel changes within the Royal Protection Unit. By the end of the meeting, Commander Harrison had agreed to postpone Margaret's reassignment while conducting a more thorough review of the security arrangements for all the royal children. This review would include input from the children themselves, something that had never been formally done before but now seemed obviously important. "I'd like to meet with Princess Charlotte," Commander Harrison said as the meeting concluded. "If she's mature enough to present reasoned arguments about her security needs, then she's certainly mature enough to be consulted about decisions that affect her daily life." Prince William smiled at this suggestion. "I think Charlotte would appreciate that very much. She's not asking to make the final decisions, but she does want to be heard. That seems reasonable to me." That afternoon, Commander Harrison found himself in the unusual position of having a formal meeting with an 11-year-old princess about security protocols. He had initially approached the meeting with some skepticism about how productive it would be, but Charlotte's thoughtful responses quickly changed his perspective. Charlotte answered his questions about her daily routines, her concerns about public appearances, and her experiences with different security arrangements with a level of insight that impressed the experienced commander. She demonstrated a clear understanding of the balance between safety and normal childhood experiences, and she provided specific examples of how Margaret's experience had been valuable in various situations. "Princess Charlotte," Commander Harrison said as their meeting concluded, "I want to apologize for not including your perspective in our initial decision-making process. You've provided valuable insights that we should have considered from the beginning." Charlotte responded with characteristic grace. "Thank you for listening, Commander Harrison. I understand that security decisions are complex, and I'm not asking to control those decisions. I just wanted to make sure that people understood why Margaret's experience matters to me and why replacing her might not be the improvement it appears to be." Commander Harrison left the meeting with a new appreciation for the importance of consulting all stakeholders in security decisions, regardless of their age. Charlotte had demonstrated that the people being protected often had valuable perspectives that professional security experts might overlook. The next day, Commander Harrison called Margaret into his office to inform her that her reassignment had been postponed, pending a comprehensive review of the royal children's security arrangements. Margaret listened to this news with professional composure, but Commander Harrison could see the relief in her eyes. "Margaret," Commander Harrison said, "I want you to know that this reconsideration isn't just about Princess Charlotte's preferences. Your years of service and your deep understanding of her needs are genuine assets that we shouldn't discard lightly. We made a mistake in not recognizing that initially." Margaret thanked the commander professionally, but inside she felt a profound gratitude not just for the reprieve, but for the way Princess Charlotte had advocated for her. The young princess had shown a level of loyalty and courage that reminded Margaret why protecting the royal family was such an honor. The comprehensive security review that Commander Harrison had promised turned out to be more revealing than anyone had anticipated. Over the following weeks, he conducted interviews with all members of the Royal Protection Unit, reviewed performance records, and most importantly, spoke with each of the royal children about their experiences and preferences regarding their security arrangements. What emerged from this review was a clear picture that challenged many assumptions about modern royal security. The younger guards, while technically proficient and enthusiastic, often struggled with the nuanced aspects of protecting royal children. They were excellent at following protocols and responding to obvious threats, but they hadn't yet developed the intuitive understanding of their charge's needs that came with years of experience. Princess Charlotte's case with Margaret was not unique. Prince George had developed a strong working relationship with his primary guard, a veteran officer named Thomas Bradley, who had been with the family for over a decade. Prince Louis, though still very young, showed clear preferences for certain guards and seemed more settled and cooperative with those he knew well. The review also revealed that the royal children's behavior and cooperation with security measures improved significantly when they trusted and felt comfortable with their guards. This wasn't just a matter of personal preference. It had direct implications for safety and security effectiveness. Commander Harrison found himself documenting findings that contradicted the modernization approach he had been pursuing. Experience and established relationships weren't obstacles to effective security. They were essential components of it. The trust between a guard and their charge created a level of cooperation and communication that no amount of technical training could replace. During this period, Margaret continued in her role protecting Princess Charlotte, though everyone understood that her status was temporary, pending the review's conclusions. The uncertainty was difficult for everyone involved, but it also provided an opportunity to observe and document the effectiveness of the established relationship. Charlotte, for her part, seemed more at ease knowing that her concerns had been heard and taken seriously. She went about her daily activities with her usual confidence, but there was an additional sense of security that came from knowing the adults around her valued her input and were willing to reconsider decisions based on her perspective. The princess also demonstrated remarkable maturity in how she handled the situation. She didn't gloat about her successful intervention or become demanding about other aspects of her royal life. Instead, she seemed to understand that she had been given a voice in an important decision, and she used that privilege responsibly. Margaret, meanwhile, found herself under informal observation as the review proceeded. She was aware that her every action was being evaluated, but this didn't change her approach to her duties. She continued to provide the same professional, attentive service that had characterized her entire career, letting her work speak for itself. The relationship between Margaret and Charlotte during this period became even stronger. Charlotte's advocacy had demonstrated the depth of their mutual respect and trust, and both of them seemed to value their working relationship even more, knowing how close they had come to losing it. Other members of the royal household also took notice of the situation. Many of the long-serving staff members felt a renewed sense of appreciation for their roles, understanding that their experience and dedication were valued rather than seen as obstacles to progress. The review had sent a message throughout the palace that loyalty and proven service mattered. 3 weeks after the review began, Commander Harrison completed his analysis and prepared his recommendations. The findings were clear and compelling, supporting Princess Charlotte's original arguments while providing the professional assessment that institutional decision-making required. The report concluded that the existing security arrangements for the royal children were highly effective and should not be changed without compelling reasons. It recommended that any future personnel changes be made based on specific performance issues or clearly identified improvements, not on general assumptions about the benefits of bringing in younger staff. Most significantly, the report established new protocols for consulting the royal children about their security arrangements. While the final decisions would always rest with security professionals and senior royal family members, the children's perspectives would be formally considered in any future changes affecting their protection. Commander Harrison scheduled a meeting with Prince William to present his findings and recommendations. As he prepared for this meeting, he reflected on how much he had learned during the review process. Princess Charlotte's intervention had forced him to examine his assumptions and had ultimately led to better decision-making procedures that would benefit the entire royal family. The meeting with Prince William was straightforward and positive. The prince listened carefully to the commander's findings and expressed satisfaction with the thorough review that had been conducted. He was particularly pleased to see that Charlotte's concerns had been validated by professional analysis, rather than simply accommodated as a favor to a precocious child. Commander Harrison, Prince William said as they concluded their discussion, "I'm impressed by how you've handled this situation. It would have been easy to dismiss Charlotte's concerns or to make cosmetic changes to appease her. Instead, you've used her intervention as an opportunity to improve our decision-making processes." Commander Harrison nodded appreciatively. "Your daughter taught me an important lesson about the value of listening to all stakeholders, Your Royal Highness. Her perspective was not only valid but essential to making the right decision." The formal announcement of the review's conclusions was made the following day. Margaret Wilson would remain as Princess Charlotte's primary guard, and the other existing security arrangements for the royal children would continue unchanged. The announcement also established the new consultation protocols that would ensure the children's voices were heard in future security decisions. News of the decisions spread quickly through the palace staff, and the reaction was overwhelmingly positive. Many staff members felt that Princess Charlotte had stood up not just for Margaret, but for the principle that experience and proven relationships should be valued and protected. Margaret learned of the final decision from Commander Harrison in a brief professional meeting. She accepted the news with characteristic grace, thanking the commander for conducting a fair and thorough review. Privately, she felt profound gratitude for Princess Charlotte's courage and loyalty. Charlotte received the news from her father that evening during their family time. Prince William explained that the review had confirmed her arguments and that Margaret would continue as her guard. Charlotte's response was typically mature. She expressed gratitude for being heard but didn't treat the outcome as a personal victory, so much as the right decision finally being made. 6 months after the review's conclusion, the positive effects of Princess Charlotte's intervention continued to ripple throughout the royal household. The new consultation protocols had been implemented successfully, and several decisions about staff assignments and protocol changes had benefited from input from the royal children. What had begun as one young princess standing up for her guard had evolved into a more inclusive and thoughtful approach to royal household management. Margaret Wilson found herself in an interesting position as one of the most respected members of the Royal Protection Unit. Her retention following the review had sent a clear message about the value placed on experience and proven relationships. Younger guards now sought her mentorship, understanding that her knowledge and skills were assets to be learned from rather than obstacles to advancement. The relationship between Margaret and Princess Charlotte had deepened beyond the professional requirements of their roles. While maintaining all appropriate boundaries and protocols, they had developed a mutual respect that served as a model for how royal security relationships could function. Charlotte continued to trust Margaret completely, and Margaret continued to provide protection that was both effective and sensitive to Charlotte's needs as a growing young person. Princess Charlotte herself had grown from the experience in ways that surprised even her parents. Her successful advocacy for Margaret had given her confidence in her own judgment and voice, but it had also taught her important lessons about responsibility and the careful use of influence. She understood that her intervention had been taken seriously because she had presented logical arguments and had acted out of principle, rather than personal preference. The princess began to take a more active interest in other aspects of royal household operations, asking thoughtful questions about how decisions were made and occasionally offering insights that adults found valuable. Her parents noticed that Charlotte was developing into someone who understood both her privileges and her responsibilities, someone who would use her position thoughtfully and fairly. Commander Harrison had also grown from the experience. The review process had made him a better leader, more thoughtful about consulting all relevant perspectives before making important decisions. He had implemented regular feedback sessions with both guards and their charges, creating formal mechanisms for the kind of communication that Charlotte's intervention had demonstrated was necessary. The commander often reflected on how close they had come to making a significant mistake. Margaret's reassignment would have broken up an effective security partnership and likely would have made Princess Charlotte less secure rather than more protected. The experience had taught him that good intentions and logical-sounding policies weren't sufficient if they ignored the human realities of the relationships involved. Other members of the royal household had taken notice of how the situation had been handled. Staff members felt more confident that their contributions were valued and that changes affecting them would be made thoughtfully rather than arbitrarily. The incident had strengthened morale throughout the palace and had reinforced the sense that the royal family genuinely cared about the people who served them. Margaret herself had become something of a mentor to other guards, sharing her insights about the importance of understanding the individuals they protected. She emphasized that effective security wasn't just about following protocols and responding to threats. It was about creating relationships of trust that allowed their charges to live their lives with confidence and dignity. The story of Princess Charlotte's intervention had also reached other royal households around the world, where it was discussed as an example of how young royals could be given appropriate voices in decisions affecting their lives. Several other royal families had implemented similar consultation processes, recognizing that children's perspectives could contribute to better decision-making. As Charlotte's 12th birthday approached, she reflected on the events of the previous year with the kind of thoughtful analysis that had become characteristic of her approach to important matters. She understood that her successful advocacy for Margaret had been significant, not just for its immediate outcome, but for what it had established about her role and voice within the royal family. The princess had learned that speaking up for what was right required courage, preparation, and respect for the complexity of adult decision-making. She had also learned that her position came with the ability to influence important decisions, and that this ability should be used carefully and responsibly. Margaret continued to serve as Charlotte's primary guard, with the same dedication and professionalism that had always characterized her work. The uncertainty and stress of the previous year had been replaced by a renewed sense of purpose and appreciation for her role. She knew that her position was secure not just because of Charlotte's advocacy, but because her value had been recognized and documented through careful evaluation. The working relationship between Margaret and Charlotte had become a model for other guard assignments within the royal household. Their partnership demonstrated how security relationships could be both professional and personally meaningful, how protection could be provided in ways that enhanced, rather than restricted, the lives of those being protected. Prince William and Catherine often observed the interaction between Charlotte and Margaret with satisfaction and pride. They could see that Charlotte felt genuinely secure and supported, which allowed her to engage with her royal duties and normal childhood activities with confidence. They could also see that Margaret took genuine pride in her work and felt valued for her contributions. The anniversary of Charlotte's intervention passed without formal recognition, but not without private reflection from those involved. Margaret marked the day by writing a letter to Charlotte expressing her gratitude for the princess's courage and loyalty. Charlotte responded with a note thanking Margaret for her years of dedicated service and for being someone she could always trust. Commander Harrison used the anniversary as an opportunity to review the consultation protocols that had been established and to assess their effectiveness. The feedback from both guards and royal family members was overwhelmingly positive, confirming that the changes had improved both security effectiveness and job satisfaction throughout the protection unit. As Charlotte grew older and took on more royal responsibilities, the lessons learned during the Margaret Wilson situation continued to influence how decisions were made about her security and support staff. The principle that she should have input into decisions affecting her daily life became an established part of how her parents and their advisors approached changes in her circumstances. The story had become part of palace folklore, told as an example of how a young person with courage and good judgment could make a positive difference in the lives of those around her. It was also remembered as a lesson about the importance of listening to all perspectives, regardless of the age or position of the person offering them. Margaret Wilson continued her service with distinction, knowing that her career had been validated in the most meaningful way possible through the advocacy of the person she had dedicated herself to protecting. Princess Charlotte continued to grow into her role with wisdom and compassion, carrying forward the lessons about fairness, loyalty, and the responsible use of influence that the experience had taught her.